What's going on, guys? It's Hank from Sprues and Brews, and today I'm going to show you how I built up this 1/48 scale F-86E Sabre from Italeri. Now, this build wasn't without its challenges, but I'm super happy with how it came out, and I'm really excited to finally add a Sabre to my collection. So you guys know the drill. Without further ado, grab yourself a beverage, get cozy, let's check it out. Alright, so as with most aircraft builds, we're going to start right here with the cockpit assembly. This is actually a rebox of a much older kit, so the interior here is pretty sparse and relies on a few decals for most of our detail. I've got a full unboxing video for this kit that you can check out here if you'd like. With just a little cleanup, our cockpit falls together pretty quickly, and we can turn our attention to the fuselage. Now, I always say that it's really important in scale modeling to review your instructions ahead of time and make a plan, and here I noticed that we've got these little extra tabs to add to the sides around the cockpit. So we're going to make sure to add those before we start painting our interior, so we can do that all in one go. But before that, we're going to do a little cleanup of the two fuselage halves and run a quick test fit with the cockpit to make sure everything goes together nicely. Since everything looks good, we can attach those tabs and get that step out of the way now. The fit here isn't incredible, so we can break out our Tamiya putty and clean up those gaps a bit. With a little bit of sanding, that joint will be a lot less visible on the finished product. At this stage, I decided to knock out the wing assembly before I broke out the airbrush, so we can snip those pieces off the sprue and build up that iconic swept wing of the Sabre. I was actually pretty impressed with the fit here, so with just a little bit of sanding and a little bit of cleanup, we've got ourselves a nice clean wing. Switching gears back to our cockpit and interior, we'll first hit the whole assembly with some flat black primer to give us a nice surface to work with. From there, we're going to use some Dunkelgrau to give the interior an overall gray paint job. Switching over to brush painting, we can add in a few details. We'll paint the control stick black, the headrest and the seat handles red, and the details of our strap with some khaki and aluminum. With all that done, we can spray the whole cockpit with a gloss coat of AK Interactive Intermediate Gauzy Agent to seal up all of our paint job. Now it's time to add our cockpit decals. Of course, we've got to break out the trusty Snow White water bowl. While it's not the most detailed cockpit in the world, I think the decal panels look pretty solid. After another coat of AK Gauzy to protect the decals, we can give the cockpit a quick dark wash to help accentuate the few molding details that are in there, and while that dries, we can turn our attention back to the wing assembly. At this point in the build, I made a huge mistake. This hobby is all about learning and improving your skills, and part of that is owning up to your own boneheaded decisions. There was a pretty bad warp at the wing root on one of the fuselage sides, and my genius idea was to break out the heat gun and try and reshape that warp. FYI, don't do this. As you can painfully see here, I almost immediately warped the whole fuselage side beyond repair. Nice work, Hank. So that whole fiasco put the build on hold for about a week until I could source a replacement. Fortunately, I only needed to build up that second fuselage half again, so now we can continue from where we were. At this stage, we can seal up our fuselage halves and clean up that seam line with a little bit of sanding. Important to note here that the instructions call out adding 20 grams of weight to the nose so we don't end up with a tail sitter, so I used 6 of these 3.5 gram fishing sinkers that I had lying around. I made a little masking tape pouch to keep them all together and slid that just beneath the cockpit floor. Then, using a little toilet paper, we can add some stuffing inside the fuselage to help prevent those weights from sliding around. Not the most elegant solution, I know, but hey, it works. Now it's time for us to get those wings in place. You'll notice the replacement kit I ordered had the exact same warp at the wing root, which was super disappointing, but definitely not breaking out the heat gun this time. We can use our Tamiya putty again and patch up some of the more egregious gaps, including that gnarly warp. After the putty dries, it's really easy to buff those down using our emery board and some sandpaper. The root warp actually ended up cleaning up pretty nicely, so I was really happy about that. With that main assembly step complete, now we can just drop all of the remaining parts into place on the aircraft. At this point, we've got just about everything attached to the aircraft, though we can leave off the wheels and cockpit for painting separately. I also chose to skip the drop tanks for now because they're honestly a little out of scale for this aircraft. To prep our canopy for paint, we can use some Tamiya masking tape for curves to block out the basic shape, and then cover the rest of the blown canopy with some Vallejo liquid mask. This stuff works great, and I highly recommend it for funky canopy shapes like this. Once that's all brushed on, we can set it aside to dry and start painting up our aircraft. We'll start out with an all-over primer coat of flat black, and then transition to some Vallejo white aluminum for the entire body of the Sabre. Gotta break out the sunglasses because this thing is getting bright now. Terrible joke, I know, forgive me. Next, we're going to mask off a few panels on the aircraft to help create some subtle paint modulation. I chose to mask off the leading edge slats, flap, rudder, and the MG port covers, but this is totally up to your preference. We're going to spray those areas with some Vallejo aluminum, as opposed to the white aluminum we used prior, and then remove those masks as soon as the paint has dried. Pretty subtle difference here, but I think it adds a lot of character to a monotone aircraft like this. With that complete, we can coat the whole Sabre with some AK Gauzy to protect our paint job and prep for decals. Now, admittedly here, I didn't do a great job filming the decal process, so I'm sorry for that. The decals themselves were great, but the measurements didn't line up very well with the positioning that was called for on the instructions, and I had to fiddle with them quite a bit to make everything look right. I decided to go with this New Jersey Air National Guard scheme from 1957 because I really like those big blue lightning bolts. With everything settled, we can now move on to the weathering process, but first it's time for yet another coat of AK Gauzy to protect all of our work so far. We're going to do a super simple weathering procedure here using some Flory Dark Dirt Wash. If you haven't seen any of my other aircraft build videos, this stuff is a game changer. It's clay based, so it's really easy to work with. You just apply a sludge wash all over the aircraft, let it dry completely, and then wipe off the excess with a damp paper towel. The end result leaves just a bit of wash in all the panel lines and really makes the whole thing pop. After the wash is removed, we can spray the whole kit with yet another coat of AK Gauzy agent, and then it's finally time to remove the canopy masks. Gotta love this part, so rewarding. The final steps are to attach the cockpit and wheels with some super glue, and that's gonna wrap up our build. So here is our finished Sabre. Despite all the struggles I had with the fit and the finicky decal placement, a little bit of paint modulation and a Flory wash we used really brought the whole thing together in the end. Not the most beginner-friendly kit, but with a little elbow grease, you can make a pretty solid piece out of it. So that's it for me today, guys. If you liked the video, please hit that like button to let YouTube know that you're interested in scale modeling videos like this one. You can also subscribe to my channel for more awesome scale modeling content. I try and post something new just about once a week. So until next time, guys, be well, happy building, cheers.